Hi guys, it's Hans. Welcome to this special edition video which I made for PaperArtsy. I'm starting today with 3 Fresco paints, which are paints by PaperArtsy. And the fun thing about these paints is that they don't have the classical shiny finish that acrylic paints have. I'm playing with a wooden spool that I'm covering in my darkest color, and I'm applying my color using a cut and dry. You could do this with any kind of sponge you have at home. I will be adding several layers of paint, but the thing is, every layer will be thinner than the previous one. So drying the first side so that I can hold it on to do the second one. And as you can see, I'm really working my paint in every little crease so that the wood is completely covered. Once I'm done with the first color, I'm drying my spool, but I'm not rinsing my cut and dry. I'm just cleaning it by dabbing it a bit on a piece of kitchen roll. I don't need it to be completely clean, and I absolutely don't want it to be saturated in water. So now I can go in with my second color, and like I said, this layer will be thinner than the previous one because I want the underlying layers to shine through. Every time I pick up paint, I first dab my cut and dry on my craft sheet so that I don't get big splatters of paint on my wooden spool. Going back in with the darker color, you can add as much layers as you want. If the underlying layer is dry, the colors won't mix up, so you can keep coming back in as much as you want. Giving it a quick blow with the heat gun, just cleaning up my cut and dry a bit so that the colors can mix up just a tiny bit. I'm using a sanding grip to scratch off some of the paint so that the wood can come through again, just like a vintage wooden spool would look like. You can only do this when your paint is really dry, otherwise it will only smudge your sanding paper. Now I'm going in with the lightest of the 3 colors. This time I'm just adding some touches of paint. I don't need to have it everywhere. And then again, playing with darker colors over the lighter color. If the colors don't mix like you would want them, just clean your sponge again a bit and then go back in. Once it has the finished look you would like it to have, you can go back in with your sanding grip just to make the wood come through again. But this time I'm only give it some light touches with my sanding grip, not to take too much of the paint away. I could do this with distress ink, but I want to make sure it will stay on there. So I'm using archival ink, but I'm using a blending tool just like I would with distress ink. This is the Sepia Archival ink. Again, working it in, but not covering just everything. And I'm taking the excess ink away. Playing again with a bit of paint that's left over on my cut and dry. And then doing the same with my blending tool that has some ink left over on it. This video is about 14 minutes long, and it took me 45 minutes to make the whole piece. Using the same ink, I'm stamping PaperArtsy Mini 30 stamp, which is a manuscript stamp, and I'm not using an acrylic block on purpose. I want my stamp to be irregular on the spool. I'm heat setting my ink, and here are the 3 spools that I've done so far. On smoothie paper, I will be stamping the text that will come around the spool. This is PaperArtsy stamp, and I have to look which one this is. Eclectic 6. Using post-its, I'm isolating the piece that I want to use so that I don't get ink all over, and this time I'm stamping with black archival ink. So this goes on my smoothie paper, which I can then trim to the right size. Heat setting it just with a quick blow, and then trimming it. Using some distress ink, I'm giving it a bit of a vintage look, and the fun thing about this smoothie paper is that when you spray water on it like I just did, the black ink will really come on top of the paper like it's being printed instead of stamped on it. It really has a very, very cool reaction to water. Crumpling it and then adding some more distress ink on the creases. Really to give it a vintage look. This could be a piece of paper that has been in my pocket for a week. Distressing the edges a bit more. And then going back in with my vintage photo distress ink. Now my vintage photo is really dry, that's why I'm going directly in with the pad. And now I'm checking where I have to trim my paper so that it fits correctly on the spool and that the text is completely visible. Giving it a quick scratch again, adding distress ink again. And now I can glue it in place. As I want to make sure it will stay where I put it, I'm using double-sided tape to glue it down. So before using a stamp to do this, make sure it will fit on the spool. Using a Tim Holtz swivel clasp, I'm turning this spool into a keychain. So I'm taking off the first jump ring, then put it back on again, so that the chain will stay nicely inside the spool. This is Fresco Beach Hut. I'm diluting it with water because I want to use it to colorize some ribbon, and in this case I'm using Tim Holtz crinkle ribbon. To make sure the color will go everywhere, I'm spraying some water first on it. And then I can use my diluted Fresco just like I would do with any other spray ink to colorize it. These are just some pieces of ribbon I had laying around that happen to be the same color, but I'm giving them an extra blue tint. Adding a bit of vintage photo. But as my ribbon had too much water on it, the blue wasn't blue enough anymore to my taste, so I added some more. And now I can dry it. The fun thing about crinkle ribbon is that when you dry it, the creases will be marked in the color. I can start attaching all my ribbons now to the jump ring that comes out of the spool. And that will add a bit of volume to the piece. I'm also adding a little pearl to give it a bit of a feminine touch, a bit of bling. Now this is a tribute to Linda Brown from Yours Artfully, who did a bracelet which I think was brilliantly done. So I'm stamping my image. This is the same Eclectic 6 stamp that I used previously. I'm stamping with StazOn shrink plastic. Then I'm trimming my image. I'm careful because the ink isn't quite dry yet. And now, using my heat gun, I'm going to shrink it. Be careful when you do this not to touch it with your hands because it's hot. That's why I'm using tweezers. And using an acrylic block, I'm giving it the shape that I want it to have. This is supposed to be rectangular and flat, so I'm using my block to help me with that. And here it is, my shrinked image. I'm going to use a scrap of smoothie paper that I'm colorizing first again with distress ink. And then again spraying some water on it just because I like how it reacts to water. And now I can glue my image on there. To do this, you best use glossy accents. Now, this is where I started talking to my kids and stopped paying attention to my camera. So you can see me starting putting my glue down, but not finishing it. So this is where the image is already glued down. This is the back side. I'm adding distress ink on the back side too, and then stamping in the same way I stamped on my spools with the Mini 30. So that every side of my image is fun to look at. Punching a hole. And then using a jump ring, I can add it to the rest of the structure. This is where I thought I was done, but not quite. This is a piece of cotton rope, and as it's too white, I'm adding a bit of distress ink on it, and then I'm just gluing it around the spool. I'm doing the same thing at the top and at the bottom, just using some tacky glue in this case. That's about it for today. I hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching and see you next week. Ta-da!